I'm Dr. Dudgeon. I've been studying leopard sharks for the better half of my life, and I'm here to answer some of your questions. Taystark asks, how long does it take internally for the eggs to develop before they are laid? Well, it takes about 1 week. So sharks have sex, and then after that, the egg is enveloped in this hard case and laid out. And then it takes about 100 to 120 days for the shark to develop inside the egg before the baby pup is born. So Ava Georgette asks, is it possible to have 2 baby sharks inside of one of these eggs? Well, yes, it is possible. We have seen twins in different species of sharks before. I haven't personally observed it inside one of these eggs yet, but I'm sure it can happen. Sam Emily 305 asks, how common do we think parthenogenesis is in leopard sharks in the wild? Parthenogenesis translates to virgin birth, and this is when female sharks and rays are able to produce babies without any contribution from males. Now, we've recorded this phenomenon in over 10 different species of sharks and rays in aquariums around the world. However, we haven't recorded it yet from any leopard sharks in the wild. 30CKMP asks, at what age are the sharks most vulnerable, and what sorts of diseases can they get? Well, we know that quite a lot of the eggs don't make it in the wild, and they're predated upon. But when they hatch out, they're most vulnerable when they're really small, newly hatched animals. As they get bigger, they become tougher and their skin thickens, and they're almost armored when they're large adults. When they're large adults, we know from in the wild that we have seen animals for over 20 years, so they have quite good survival rates. The types of diseases they have as babies tend to be things like parasites. So they may have some internal parasites that we need to be aware of. It's really important to maintain high quality, clean water in these aquariums. So Lex Sanders asks, is there any reason for the variation in the different spotting patterns that we see in the leopard sharks? And could it be because of sex differences? Well, we don't know why there is variation. We know in the adults that we see lots of different spotting patterns. Some look like flowers, some are just clumps of spots, some are single spots. But one of the big mysteries for us is how does that change from the babies into the adults? And can we predict from the patterns that we see in these juvenile sharks? So far, we don't see any differences due to the different sex of the animals, but there may be other reasons why there's so much variation. A few of you have asked what they like to eat as juveniles and also as adults in the wild. So as juveniles, they actually really love to eat snails, and they have teeth that are very sharp and needly with a flat plate, and in fact it almost works like Velcro. They can hold on to the shell and suck the snail out from inside the shell and then spit the shell out. In the wild, when we've examined their using DNA to examine what prey they're feeding on, we found that the adults tend to be eating small fish that live in the sand, like flatheads and dragonets. Mr. Lamb asks, how do we distinguish leopard sharks from other types of shark species? Well, there are many different features, but there's a couple that are quite interesting. Firstly, leopard sharks have one of the most striking changes from the juvenile to the adult forms. When they're small, they're really striking and have these black and white banding patterns. These break up as they get older, and in the adults, they have a whole range of beautiful different spotting patterns from quite leopardy through to just single spots. The other distinguishing feature of the leopard shark is its very long single lobe tail. The single lobe is typical of animals that sit on the bottom, but the other species that have this, the tails are much, much shorter than the leopard shark. We have an idea, which is that in the juvenile forms, when those little banding sharks with their very long tails are swimming through the water column, they look like sea snakes, and that might be one of the reasons that they have this tail. We're not sure, but it's an interesting idea. Nat asks, what is the closest living relative of the leopard shark, and what are some of the similarities that they have? Well, the leopard shark is the only species in its own family, the Stegostoma. But one of its closest living relatives is actually the whale shark. Leopard sharks reach about 2.5 meters long. Whale sharks are much more enormous than that. But some of the features that they have in common is that they both have these really dense ridges of skin that run along the sides of their bodies. And they also both have quite ornate spotting patterns that you can use to tell each individual apart. Nesha asks, how did we come up with a technique to put leopard sharks into tonic immobility by grabbing the end of the tail? Well, this is actually a method that leopard sharks use themselves. So when they're mating, the male will bite the end of the tail and make the female go all floppy so that he can have sex with her. Now, a colleague of mine, Rob Slade, who was helping me when we started working on the adult leopard sharks in the wild, thought this would be a good technique to try out for us to be able to actually sample those animals and bring them to the surface to do our research. And amazingly, it works. This cutie liver asks, how do you become an expert on leopard sharks and how do you become a shark conservationist? Well, you start off, for me, going to university to learn about marine science and all of the different aspects of marine science, which are not just sharks, but also the ecosystem that's relevant to sharks. And if you're really interested in conservation, it's great to connect with some of the conservation groups that are doing amazing work around the place to learn about the different projects that are really needed right now. So Nesha Achuda asks, how does it feel to have a global project working on stegs after I've been working on them for 20 years? Well, Nesha, the answer is it feels amazing. It's so wonderful to see all this research and conservation effort for this really unique and extraordinary species happening around the world. That's all the questions we have. See you next time.